Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Rock and Roll Religion, the Genesis, where we're basically going back into the history of rock and roll to determine where all this stuff came from. And we've essentially hit that point. If you haven't seen the previous episodes in the series, please go back and watch them. They're great, and I really appreciate all the guys who stopped by to help me out on it. We've gotten up to about 1968 with the psychedelic rock movement. And today we're going to carry that through into the end of the decade and the creation of my favorite genre of music, the immortal classic that will never die called heavy metal. And we're going to do all of that and talk about the evolution of it and where that sound came from and all of that. And here to help me do that is a friend of the channel, the guy you guys have probably seen in chat a lot, and one of the first guys I ever had on the show as a guest. So please welcome back Christian DeLorme. How's it going, dude?
It's wonderful. We're talking music. I'm in seventh heaven.
Hell yeah, man. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah. It's a labor of love.
Absolutely. I don't even consider it labor at that point. This is just fun.
I know, that's the best part of it. It takes no energy, no effort, no nothing. It's just fun to do, and you get happiness out of it.
What was it? Mark Twain who said, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
That's right. I use that quote with my son. And ironically enough, he's in the Canadian military. Go figure.
Yeah. And you know what? Yeah, he wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But no, this is going to be an epic show. This is like for me, some of the greatest music that has ever been written.
Yes.
From the early stuff and like Uriah Heep and stuff like that, all the way to, we're probably going to get into the 70s and bands like Heart and Judas Priest later. But this is the heart of what of my favorite music. Like, this is where all of it comes from. Mm-hmm. Even the stuff that I love that comes later is based on this.
And not only that, one of our favorite bands flourished during this period, 67 to 72. Okay.
And we've talked about them a little bit
in
the last episode, but it bears repeating. We're going to go over a little bit of CCR because they do have an influence on this genre.
And they were influenced by this genre too. Like one of the albums by Creedence Clearwater Revival, Pendulum. Okay, there is one song on there. It's called Pagan Baby. It just smells and reeks of Black Sabbath.
It really does. Black Sabbath. That's the cool part of this era is at the beginning you see bands like, Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and maybe even Uriah Heep influencing Black Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of years later, you start hearing Black Sabbath influencing Led Zeppelin and all of the other bands they were influenced by, including CCR.
It's beautiful. It's like a root system. It just grows everywhere. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and just the same as things flow one way down, they also flow back up.
Yep.
And the really good ideas echo back.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that's one of those great things about this genre, especially, is that rock and roll. I mean, we covered it earlier in the British invasion, where, England took what America was doing with rock and blues and heavy metal, or not heavy metal yet, but that style of music in the early 60s, and then threw it back at us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, put their own spin on it and then send it back to us. Like, hey, we did this. What do you think? And then we iterated back on that, and you end up with like a lot of the Vietnam era stuff.
Yep.
Which I think is cool as fuck. Where it's two nations, almost two cultures, kind of speaking to each other musically.
And don't forget to get into the weeds here. Don't forget, music is social political too. Look at the Vietnam era.
Oh, music is a kind of a reflection of the social and political spectrum of its time. That's why when we were going through the 50s stuff, we were also going through the social and political evolution of what was going on in America at that time.
Yep.
And rock and roll could only have really come about in that place and that time.
Just like laughter is a mirror of the soul, music is a mirror of society, I find.
Pretty much.
Yep.
And well, art in general
Mm,
and music in particular
exactly.
is a way of holding up a mirror to society and going like, this is who we are.
And then you get some very gifted people just grabbing the ball and running their own way, which starts all different genders, genres.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I love it.
And that's one of the reasons I love rock and roll so much, is because it's iterated on itself so many times very quickly.
And like Soul Assassin says in the chat here, music knows no boundary. It just flows. It's, I say, a root system. I'm sure there's something, a better analogy, but anyway, it's wonderful.
Yep. And it's a way that people who don't even speak the same language can communicate very effectively.
Absolutely. Okay, who would have ever thunk there would be Japanese metal band? Those people are totally counterculture to heavy metal, trash metal, and all that stuff. It goes everywhere. My surprise is the German and the Nordic metal bands. And from what I'm not a metal guy, I'll be honest with you, but going from what you sing and Soul Assassin and all that, these are some of the best music creators, and they're all exports.
Yeah, they took what America and Britain were doing with the genre and then ran with it.
Yeah, and black metal too. There you go.
Yeah, black metal is mostly started in England with Venom, but we'll get to that.
All right,
That's gonna be a whole show for a different day, because I fully plan on continuing this past 1970.
Okay,
And going down into the subgenres and all of that. So
Pope,
stay tuned for that.
I just want to add something. It's kind of like us Canadians in hockey and find out Sweden is the Olympic gold medal. It never happens. Like, Sweden's an export. We brought hockey to Sweden in the 1950s.
Yep.
How come they're kicking our ass? This is us. So anyway,
it's the same thing with Americans and cars in Japan. Like, wait a minute, we introduced a lot of modern car design into Japan in the 60s. How are they now kicking our ass in it in the late 70s?
Okay, I have a comment, but I'm not going to say it because it might get you in trouble. Cancel.
Yeah, fuck it. I don't care.
Rice wagons, the Fast and the Furious. Hey,
I will say
muscle,
a lot
everybody.
A lot of those cars have
horsepower.
A lot of merit. A lot of those cars are actually better machines than the things America was putting out at the same time.
Reverse engineering. That's all it is. They do not.
A lot of it was original design too. Things like the RX-7, which I actually owned the follow-up to that, the RX-8, and the rotary engine. That thing was a revolutionary design.
Okay,
no pun intended.
No.
But it was a very different way of doing a gas engine, in that you have a fully functional internal combustion engine with 3 moving parts. Mm-hmm. It's wild. And any of you guys who are interested, definitely go look up how a Wankel engine works on YouTube. It is wild. And I owned one for a lot of years, and I loved the hell out of it. Unfortunately, she died a couple of years back, and I couldn't afford to get her fixed. But getting back into the music, we are at a very interesting juncture musically, where the psychedelic rock scene is going hard. You have the Summer of Love going on. Last time we covered Woodstock, and on the other side of this, we have this whole kind of harder movement that's less hippie, less, free love and all that, and more of like the working class response to it. Mm-hmm. That would become heavy metal later, but it kind of starts earlier than people think, with bands like the Kinks and stuff like that, where they have those a little bit harder, more edgy riffs, and then it goes into bands we'll start with this guy right here because he's a huge influence on it. And unfortunately, he died before it really took off because I would love to see what he would have done with the genre, being Jimi Hendrix.
Yes.
This man just, first of all, changed the way people play guitar.
He was playing left-handed or right-handed Stratocaster.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like this man just changed the way people play the instrument.
And
Like,
then, oh, sorry, Pope, just to add, a Vietnam vet. So that cultural
yes, he was
aspect.
very early on. He was it was a paratrooper with the 101st Airborne.
And not only that, he was an American that had to go to England to make it big.
Yeah, because you know the kind of music he was trying to play in the early 60s wasn't really popular yet.
No.
And it wouldn't really catch on until the like 66, 67 in England.
Yeah.
And then get brought back right over to the States.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody loved it. It was just one of the most amazing things they'd ever heard. Because I think in 66, when he started doing it, really, it was a little too much. It was a little too different.
Well, don't forget.
And Fizz, yes, he did die of a drug overdose, which is unfortunate. I believe he was 27.
Yeah, the golden age. Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. I think there's a group of them. The idol, like the legendary.
Yeah, I forget whether it's 27 or 29, but none of them lived past it.
Right. But don't forget, Jimmy was not only a revolutionary, okay? Because right up to, think about it, back in 65, 66, you still had Dave Clark 5, right? Standard 50s drums and all that. Jimmy brought in Mitch Mitchum, okay? Like drumming like nobody ever heard. And there was also a competitive band with him, Eric Clapton and Cream. Okay,
yes.
Those two guys were okay. We talked about this, but those two guys were the foundation of metal and the progressive rock. Like they changed rock and roll. They brought it out of the 40s and 50s and brought it into the 60s and the 70s.
Unfortunately, I couldn't get a good picture of Cream, but we are going to talk about them in a second. There's another guy I want to talk about because Eric Clapton lists him as a reference or as a influence.
Yeah.
When he's going through it, and that's Carlos Santana.
Yeah.
And holy shit, what a different guitar player for this period, and yet so successful in that he brought an entire different style with that Spanish influence into his guitar playing, but he was also playing blues. And it was different than anything anyone had ever heard.
Exactly. And that was the thing then. They were coming out of conformity, okay? And yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos Santana was a session musician for Ricky Valens, the original culture breaker.
It wouldn't surprise me. And there's been a couple of guys that, like, obviously, like the Surfaris and a couple of other Hispanic bands like Los Lobos and stuff like that that came out in the 60s in California.
Right.
Because especially in Southern California, being stationed there for 4 years, you have this interesting mixture of American and Mexican cultures.
Yep.
That blends very well.
Surprisingly.
And especially in their art and their sensibilities and stuff like that. Like they're all, like it just mixes very well. And it all kind of vibes together. And that's where you kind of get the surf rock scene of the early 60s. And then Santana's kind of an extension of that. He's kind of adding that more Spanish flavor into a blues guitar.
Right. Exactly.
It's pretty much picture a flamenco guitarist meets B.B. King, which I love both styles. So that's
and there's nothing wrong with what you just said. Even those two words don't connect together. That's just beauty.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is things that, And Soul Assassin, I've been trying to get him on for these episodes because this is the shit he knows way better than I ever will.
He's over on Mead right now.
Yeah. I want to get him on here because he knows the Spanish influence on rock and pop music way better than I ever will. Because he grew up in that side of the sphere, and I didn't. Like, I can read about it, I can listen to a lot of it and understand what's going on, but he lived it, so there's that. But this was a huge influence not only on American rock music, but just on rock music in general. Because at this point, it wasn't even that America was influencing Britain. Well, we've now gone into Britain influencing America, and now they're influencing each other almost in real time.
Exactly.
So, like, this is becoming a cross-Atlantic phenomenon that are basically doing the same things at the same time, not even necessarily because they heard someone else do it, but because they both had the same idea. And that's where the natural progression would go.
And not only that, they're building off each other's success. So whatever, we are the winner as fans because we're getting better quality every time one of these guys decides
seeing iteration after iteration.
Yeah, exactly.
Great rock and roll.
Exactly. Every
month or so. And it's just, I mean, you have early CCR in 67. You have, not that I'm a huge fan of them, but they did have a lot of influence on the genre. Grateful Dead coming out in 67.
Yeah.
Well, like, you have a ton of all of this. Jimi Hendrix starting to do a lot more with the psychedelic stuff in 68.
Yeah.
And then you also had this hard rock genre that kind of evolved by itself in 67 to 68 with Deep Purple and Uriah Heep.
Yeah, Uriah Heep.
These guys, I think, are the true origin of heavy metal.
You think?
Because it has the same attitude and the same, not only the same aggression and sound, essentially, even if what they were doing with a Hammond organ would later be done with an electric guitar. You listen to early Deep Purple or Uriah Heep, especially songs like Easy Living and stuff like that. Like, this is early metal.
Okay, my 2 cents is Deep Purple's musical climax is Machine Head. You listen to the album, they're at their peak of everything. And everything after that was kind of either a cheap knockoff or just going down because they lost band members and all that. So to me,
well, I mean, the songs I would list specifically as influential on metal going forward would be songs like Highway Star,
Lazy.
What's that?
Lazy,
Space Truckin'.
Yep.
Obviously Smoke on the Water, because like one of the first riffs anyone learns how to play these days.
Yeah.
But those riffs were all revolutionary at the time.
Well, yeah, and again, you're still in the infancy stage, the transitional change. You're coming out of the 40s and the 50s. Your fathers and grandfathers swing, jazz, even Elvis was still 50s material. Now, This is the teenage years. This is the new progression. This is, all right, we got the basic. We got the blues, we got the jazz, we got the gospel. What are we going to do with it?
And it's all come together in the late 50s, I think. Well, with like guys like Chuck Berry and Little Richard.
Yeah,
but really laid out the roadmap for everybody to follow. But I think by the end of the British invasion, you have the full DNA of rock and roll laid out before you.
Well, let's put it this way: the Beatles' Helter Skelter is heavier than the U2's Helter Skelter.
Yes,
what does that tell you? So,
I mean, they did that in what, 69?
No, Helter Skelter was, what was it, 67, 68, just before they broke up. I think it was on the White Album. Helter Skelter.
Right before they broke up would be 69.
They did break up. No, they broke up in 70.
Yeah, they did.
But Helter Skelter was a song that during the Manson family and all that. But
Yeah, so that would be if the Manson family and
68,
stuff are listening to that, that would be the summer of '69.
yeah, and Bono in a live version of Helter Skelter, he says Charles Manson stole this from the Beatles. We're stealing it back, and they do Helter Skelter, but not Slash, sorry, The Edge cannot mimic George Harrison. George Harrison was actually heavier back in the '60s than Bono and
George is an underrated guitar player in my
oh, big
mind.
time, and he's a wild ass.
Even though I'm not a huge Beatles fan, I like a lot of their individual stuff a lot more.
Right. Well, so do I. Okay, so George Harrison gets flaky. George Harrison doesn't get good until he's with the Traveling Wilburys.
A lot of
Sorry.
their shit is fucking awesome. You
Oh,
combine
Jeff
George
Lynne.
Harrison's guitar talent with with Roy Orbison and Tom Petty's lyrical content.
And Jeff Lynne. Jeff
Yeah,
Lynne's vocals
that's
and
right.
all
He was
that.
in there too.
Yeah, Jeff Lynne.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
you know,
we'll get to the Traveling Wilburys
all right,
someday.
well, get me back on because I got lots to say about it. And you know what? You know what's the funny thing? This, if you listen to the music, don't forget the Beatles were inspired by the 50s rock, Elvis and all that. You listen to the Traveling Wilburys, Bob Dylan was in there
Yeah,
too. Okay. You listen to
and a
them,
lot of folk stuff.
their sound is 50s true and true. Uh, go, gospel, blues, and folk. You listen to it in the back. The rhythm guitar, oh, it's awesome. I love Travel Ring
Well,
Wilburys.
I gotta go for a second, man. But
Yeah, okay.
how
What do you
about
want me to talk?
introduce? You can introduce yourself to the chat and
Yeah,
plug your wares
all right,
as it is.
no problem. And I'll ask you the same favor after. All right, guys. My name is Christian Delorme. I'm a Canadian. I live up here in Ottawa, Canada. I'm a lover of music. As you can see under my name, Vinyl Revival, I got this love of music, vinyl mostly. Vinyl is the best sound. And I am the biggest fan of Creedence Clearwater Revival. So, this Vinyl Revival is my channel that I haven't started yet on YouTube, but still. And I actually met Pope on Gilded, and my name on Gilded is Credence Gold 13. It comes from CCR's first best of hits, Credence Gold on vinyl, of course, which I own, and 13, which is my favorite number. So, and me and Pope, how I became his first more or less guest. He comes up to me online. He says, "Hey, are you a Credence fan?" I said, "I'm the biggest." And he's like, "Oh, you want to do a show with me and all that?" I said, "Dude, I'm in." Ironically enough, here's a little something you guys don't know about Pope. He's an ex-Marine, a corporal. He's seen some action. And me and Dan, we both have a love for music, lovely ladies, and the Army. To the point. Sorry, Dan. We were just getting into where I was. So anyway, so that's that. So Pope, I need to ask you the same favor.
All right.
Oh, and one last thing, chat. My first of all, I never was in the Canadian military because I never passed the medical. But my love of the military shines so much on my son is a what's the English word? Exemplary soldier in the Canadian Army. So there you go, guys. That's a bit about me and why me and Pope do live stream together.
Absolutely,
so I will be back, sir. Give me no more than 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, I mean, you heard the man. We connected over CCR. So this kind of music is bringing multiple generations of people together in a lot of ways, because this is the point where rock and metal kind of agree a lot with the late 60s, early 70s. I don't know many heavy metal fans that aren't also CCR fans or things like that, because let's face it, it's all just great music. And this is one of the reasons I started this show, is to connect guys in our space and fandom on something that we can all agree on, which most of us, let's face it, rock and roll is kind of one of the universal languages of music in these days. Even if metal is not your thing, I mean, it all comes from rock and roll. And we're going to go into that here in a second. But I really appreciate you guys all showing up. Just to get some of the admin stuff out of the way, there's a link to the Gilded page in the description. If you guys haven't joined already, Soul Assassin, why the fuck aren't you in there? You're here every week. Get in there, stupid. There is a Stream Elements link in the pinned message and the description of the video. If you do feel like supporting us financially, I question your financial competence, but thank you for doing so if you choose to. This is literally just me doing whatever research I can and then just talking about the music I love. So if you choose to support that, then I appreciate you more than you know. But I can't recommend you do it because, it's probably a bad investment. I'm going to spend it on maybe some graphics and stuff like that. And other than that, you're still going to get the same shit tier content I've always done. So, that being said, yeah, Soul Assassin, I mean, CCR is one of those things where even if you're not familiar with who they are as a band, you know their songs. And we're going to get into a couple of other ones like that tonight. Especially bands like Led Zeppelin, where even if you don't know it's them, you've heard it. So, like, this is the level of stuff we're talking about that transcends genre and turns into a cultural force. And this is one of the things I've started my channel to talk about. And one thing I think is still sadly underrated in a lot of places is that we have a ton of channels that talk about pop culture and movies and video games and comic books and all that. And I'm into all those things. And I love the fact that people are talking about all those things. But music is a huge part of culture. And I feel like it is a missed opportunity for our community to get our voice heard and get in on it. Because I feel like especially rock and especially punk has been taken over by the left and is becoming more and more political. And that's not what rock and metal was ever supposed to be about. It was supposed to be completely anti-establishment and basically screw those in power, live your life the way you want to live it. And I'll be damned if I ever stray from that. Like, that's not something we do as people. And that's not something we should ever do as rock fans. And I feel like not talking about rock and roll or music in general as part of the pop culture wars is a ceding ground in a lot of ways. But no, I mean that's me getting off my soapbox. And we should be talking about the music that inspires us. If it's rock and metal, great. If it's country, go for it. But I don't see that many music channels, especially on our little side of the internet here. So let this be my call to action to all of you of if you have a band or a musical genre or whatever you want to do, go do a video on it. Hell, tell me and come on the channel and do it. I mean, me and Christian did a video on CCR almost a year ago now.
Yeah, well, it was the summer last year.
Yeah,
and it was just the video like what our stream was 2.5 hours, and it was just two dudes talking about music, and then it evolved into the War of 1812 and all. But it doesn't matter. as long as you guys do what you enjoy.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
two dudes having a conversation about stuff they're interested in. And you know what? That's the basis of most conversation in general is just starting a conversation and see where it goes.
And that's the basis of the greatest bands history has ever known. A bunch of dudes that love something, they sucked at it. Look at Motley Crue. Nikki Sixx could barely walk straight when he became the awesome bassist of Motley Crue. There were just a bunch of guys out of LA that just wanted to play hard rock. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't have to be successful either, as long as you just do what you love and push out the beauty in your love of music.
Well, that's why I respect a lot of the black metal bands because there is no money in
Mm.
the black metal genre. These guys have day jobs, which is why
Yep.
most of them never tour and why some of them only tour in the summers because like they get one vacation a year and they use that to tour the European festival circuit.
Yeah, exactly.
And other than that, they have day jobs. I'll have to ask Imperatus again. There's one band who one of their members is a mailman in his real life. Like, and me and 70s were talking last episode. Like, a lot of the guys that the British blues guys or the British guitar players like worshipped as like gods, as like American blues guitar players, were basically working in the studios, like repainting the walls and stuff like that, just as a day job. Like,
did you have a
to pay
story?
off their studio time.
Did you have a story about what was it? BB King was painting the walls of the studio.
Muddy Waters.
Muddy Water of all people. Muddy
Muddy
fucking
fucking
Waters.
Was painting the studio walls.
And then these
somebody
guys
had to.
Yeah.
And they were like looking at it like, this man is a god. Why is he painting the walls?
Oh no, but to follow up Pope's thought here. Listen, guys, the only reason I have a channel is because he convinced me. Me and him were chatting on Gilded. And he's like, "Yeah, go and do it." The problem is everything is being cleansed, everything's being corporatized, and everything sucks nowadays. There is no more Deep Purple. There is no more Credence. There's no more good anything. Because
which is why it's on us to crank the volume up to 11.
Yeah.
Get on our speakers and just give a giant flying middle finger to anyone who tells us to stop.
Yeah. And it might be the next in thing. Groove makers. Because again, back then there was no corporate fads. There was corporate fads, but the real fads was the counterculture, the music revolution or
and
revolution.
A lot of it. This was not. This is the cool part about the 60s. Is a lot of this stuff was not manufactured by record labels. This was just how music was evolving.
Yeah.
At that point, and it was genuinely incredible to watch because a lot of the stuff from the late 80s into the early 90s, a lot of that was manufactured.
Yeah. Well, 2000s, Britney Spears on end.
The pop music side of it was always kind of heavily produced. But even on the rock and metal side of it, like a lot of the hair metal bands from the late 80s were still popular, but their contracts were up and the record labels were going to have to pay them an awful lot of money. So they decided to drop most of them and go with this new genre called grunge.
Yes. Okay. I'm guilty of that. I love grunge. Okay.
I like some of it, but a lot of the stuff that they were really trying to promote is just just different. It's not good.
Yeah. Well, some of it was commercial, but I just loved the new sound. I liked it. It was an evolution. I didn't care for the fashion, but I kind of liked it. But you know what, guys? The beauty of today's, if you got real parents in this world, I got a 15-year-old daughter and I got a 22-year-old son. You know what? They do not like the new stuff. Guess what they're listening to? They're listening to their dad's stuff. Do you think my daughter likes Justin Bieber? No. She likes Motley Crue. Okay? And all these, actually, my daughter likes black metal. Okay? Believe it or not, my sweet little girl loves black metal.
Hell yes.
but because of we bringing something that is so potently lovable, I don't know if that's an English word I can use. English is my that our children can only love it. So
Yeah.
how else can you, like they might try to push Justin Bieber and all this fucking pop bullshit that you listen on
Well, but when it's
XFM.
stuff that we're passionate about, and then we pass down to people who
That's
listen to us,
and not
whether it
only
be
that,
people in the chat, whether it be our children, whatever, or people we work with, whatever. I've gotten guys that work into bands just by playing some of their stuff.
yeah. Oh, and by the way, Pope, my daughter is into. She gave up ballet classes and now is doing drumming because her idol is Tommy Lee from Motley Crue.
Nice.
I didn't do that. Oh, I don't think I did, or whatever.
May have been by accident, or she may have been watching Courtney's videos again.
Yes, yes, Courtney. What a great girl. I love Courtney. She's, you know what? She's my adoptive little sister. Courtney, if you're going to
She's
listen to
great.
this, I love you, Courtney. You're wonderful. You're the little sister I always wanted and I never had.
She's great.
Wonderful.
But
And a
no,
big
getting
heart.
back into the timeline here,
Yes.
I mean,
Deep
we're
Purple.
into the early Deep Purple, which is also one of the reasons I state that anyone who says that synthesizer or keyboard is not a metal instrument can straight up go fuck themselves. It's been there from the very beginning. I mean, a Hammond organ was one of Deep Purple's go-to staples.
John Lord.
John Lord was a great keyboardist too.
Now, and to confirm your thought, Pope, okay, you listen to Deep Purple's Lazy, and you will see that the organ, the Hammond organ, sounds actually a bit better than the guitar because it's as craftfully and it's as enchanting and it's as engaging. So there you go.
And a lot of the deep, a lot of the early Deep Purple stuff. I don't think they've
Hush.
fully figured out how to utilize Richie Blackmore yet.
Well, that's why I keep saying that Machine Head is their climax. That's where they were at their best with
And
all
if
the
I'm not
right
mistaken, that
musicians.
was what 1971.
You know what? You might be right. I don't know today. I thought it was 72, but I might be wrong. I'm not sure.
So it's a little after the period we're talking, but you can clearly hear that they're heading in that direction.
Yes.
And so is Cream.
Yeah. Well,
They have a lot of very heavy stuff in this period, like White Room, Layla. All their
Crossroads.
classic stuff is right here.
Crossroad.
And
Robert Johnson's blues classic from the 20s, 1929, has
yeah,
turned into a heavy metal freaking. That's where Clapton got his guitar god.
yeah, and like it's funny because Cream had elements of heavy metal, so did Deep Purple, so did Led Zeppelin, and then they all kind of started tying it together
Yep.
into, which is why we call these bands proto metal. Is like they all had parts of the sound and the attitude, but like
Got it.
they never fully put it together. Although I will say Led Zeppelin came close in '69 with Led Zeppelin 3.
Okay.
Because you had things like the Immigrant Song on there. That is just straight up metal beat.
Okay. Again, I won't argue with you because again, this is metal is not my thing. I go into hard rock as far. So
Well, I've played it. I've listened to it, and it has all of the DNA of a heavy metal song. It just doesn't quite have the title yet.
okay.
And the funny part is the title would come from a band that was not in the running to be heavy metal. They were more of a hard rock band. But a lyric to one of their songs would actually end up lending the title to Judas Priest, which is Steppenwolf.
Oh, nice. Yes. And a great American Canadian collaboration.
Yeah, almost like the band where like half the band's Canadian, half of the band's American. And they just kind of created this really cool vibe.
Yep. Steppenwolf.
And if you guys have never listened to Magic Carpet Ride, first of all, what the fuck are you doing with your life? And second of all, go listen to it. It's a sick song. And also, Born to Be Wild is one of their classics, and that's where the line Heavy Metal Thunder comes from. That Rolling Stone magazine used to describe Judas Priest in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the term really starts being used.
Okay. Just to give you, if you're a fan of subgenres, okay, these guys were more hard blues than anything else. Okay,
Well, hard
and
blues is what would turn into heavy metal.
exactly. So again, it's a proto. There, these guys are another stepping stone of prototype music, but
With
their
these
main
guys,
thing,
especially the drumming and vocals,
yes,
would lend a lot into what was coming later.
yes, they were the trendsetters, as you say in English.
Yeah, and especially that off-pattern drumming and that wailing vocal by Robert Plant
Now,
would
and don't forget,
really come to define the genre in its early days.
yeah, but off-pattern drumming is basically jazz. Okay, same thing with Ginger Baker.
Well, there's a
Okay,
lot of jazz drummers that end up in metal bands.
exactly. Because those were the best drummers there were back in
Yeah,
the day, and even today, the best drummers ever are jazz drummers. So anyway, I always found I love the drumming of Steppenwolf because it had a nice jazz tune to it, a
yep.
jazz beat to it. And one of my favorite drummers, as a drummer myself, mind you, a garage drummer, but is Ginger Baker and uh, uh, Blakely, Art Blakely.
And I think you were in chat when me and 70s were talking to some of the rock and roll rowdies, where they were talking about like nights in the speakeasy where you'll see Ginger Baker playing with Jimi Hendrix,
Yep.
and like I think I brought up the point then where it's just like I can't imagine like all of the great music that is just trapped within those walls because no one ever recorded it.
Right. No, that's true. And let's not forget, Pope, around this time, there was a new genre coming out called fusion, which also brought some good music. They
Yep.
would bring heavy metal, they would bring country, they would bring blues, and they would make a whole song out of it, and it was just good. And that was also an integral part of rock and roll because it was one of those branches that knew no boundary and they went out left. And I'm talking about Blood, Sweat, and Tears, if you know what I mean.
Yep. And the funny part is like a lot of people will try to complain about that. It's like, how can rock and roll complaining about combining different styles? Like that's literally how we came to be.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're a fusion genre in and of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Absolutely.
you take your influences from who you get, and then um, obviously you have this, road we're marching down from 1967 really until 1968. We're talking about really more psychedelic rock, but then it gets harder and deeper.
All right. And when you keep saying 1967, I'll tell you what the genesis of that was. Monterey Pop Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? That's where Jimmy had his first gig in North America and he just blew everybody away. We were going psychedelic, but Jimmy brought it back to hard
That
rock.
that and the Summer of Love in Haight
Yeah,
Ashbury in 1967, with like the rise of the Grateful Dead and all that, like that all came out that summer.
all right.
So
So
67 was really where that whole train got rolling,
exactly.
and
And
then
sorry, go ahead.
68 was kind of where, well, when you're looking at it, the hard rock scene kind of evolved from that in a way.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, to use an analogy, a trucker's analogy, because that's my day job. The Summer of Love, Cream and Jimmy gave it a pounding.
Yep.
There you go.
But it's it's really just cool to see like all the musical stuff that somebody just does, and then you see all of the after effects of people just taking what their idea and running with it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the beauty of that. Okay, so you still had okay Uriah Heep, even though they're back at what was it, Magician's Birthday, their album, their great album. I still think that was psychedelic, but you still had
It's a
heavy
little bit
metal.
of both.
Okay, yeah, okay, it's okay. You're right, but there was still a lot of components. Like it's not like there was one genre that took the ball and ran away with it. That wasn't until what 73, 72 until Machine Head, and then Black Sabbath came on, and then you had Judas Priest and all that. So back then it was still a let's call it I wouldn't call it a salad bar, but a buffet of
Yep.
great music that everybody and anybody could enjoy.
Yeah, I'm just gonna share this real quick, which is this is Uriah Heep, and I think 19. I guess this is 72, so this is a little bit later,
Okay.
but you really get the idea that they were all traveling on the same road. They just
Right.
had a little bit different routes. If I can share screen. Here we go.
Oh, Wizard. Okay.
I mean, you could already hear the Black Sabbath influence coming
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
them through this.
Well, this is more Deep Purple influence.
Yeah, I mean, this is like that's basically a fusion of Black Sabbath and Deep Purple.
Yeah,
'Cause you
exactly.
have the Hammond organ, but you also have that deeper guitar rhythm.
And the vocals. Don't forget the vocals.
Yep. And it's really just a cool thing to see like all of these bands just kind of iterating off of each other, and one of them created an entirely new genre of music out of it. In fact, completely by accident, literally, being Black Sabbath, because in '68 they were a blues band called Earth. And the last day of work before he was going to join the band full time, Tony Iommi was apparently called in to fill in for another worker at, I believe, British Steel in Birmingham.
Okay.
And he was running a sheet metal press, and the press came down and amputated the tops of two of his fingers on his left hand.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to then create prosthetics and stuff like that. So he had to
Yeah.
down tune half a step to be able to bend properly like a good blues guitarist can.
Yes.
And that created that very deep, doomy sound that Black Sabbath became famous for.
Now, Pope, I'm going to open Pandora's box. I know
Mm-hmm.
you are a guitarist. I have some buddies up here in Ottawa that are guitarists, and they're saying Tony Iommi is not really that good of a guitarist. He's a make believe guitarist. He's only good because of his amputation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he would have been a great blues guitarist without it, and I think he's an absolute revolutionary with it because he not only relearned how to play guitar with that disability,
He created a new sound.
he created an entirely new sound and then ran with it.
And that's something else that Clapton and Cream was fucking awesome for, because Clapton used to untie some of his guitar strings to have a different sound.
Yep.
Not only would he idolize Robert Johnson, but he would take Robert Johnson's sound and making it his own, which is why Cream was so good and Eric Clapton in the long run was so awesome.
Which he's one of my favorite guitar players, full stop.
Eric Clapton?
Him and Mark Knopfler are two of my favorites.
Mark Knopfler. Wow. All right. Hey, don't forget, Mark Knopfler is a good guitarist, but don't forget, he's a great songwriter also.
That was the other thing, is he can not only play like an absolute boss, he can write.
Yes, and he comes from a working class family. So just to show you,
Well, that's kind of part of the whole ethos of this movement in the late 60s and early 70s, you had the hippie movement who were more like the middle class bourgeois kids
Yeah.
who like were going to college and learning about like the evils of Westernism and all this other
Yeah.
shit and like peace, love. And then you had the working class response to that, which was hard rock and heavy metal, of basically just talking about all the shit that was wrong in this world.
Yeah. And
And then you had these four glorious bastards from Birmingham, England, which is a steel town at this time.
yeah, working class again.
Yeah, like
Blue
all working
collar.
class boys. Like I said, Tony was working in the steel mill at the time.
Yeah.
Then you had Bill Ward, who was more of a jazz drummer than anything, and was just really interesting in terms of his style.
And he was
Geezer
awesome.
Butler, who was playing bass in an entirely different way, very jazzy, very different from your normal rock bass player.
Now,
And then you had the kind of, I don't want to say weak link because he's Aussie, but you had John Osborne coming in and playing the vocals, but he wasn't really a writing force in the band.
right. I was going to say the bass player. Okay. Wouldn't you say that he was inspired by Jack Bruce of Cream? Who
Yes, I would say
of Manfred Mann, do be dee 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 dum dee dee. Don't you think that maybe he's an offspring of Jack Bruce?
I would say that too, but like he has his own style too. When you hear songs like NIB,
yes. Oh, I love that.
actually, let me look that up and we'll play that real quick. I don't care if we get fucking struck because that intro is one of the best bass riffs I've ever heard.
NIB, Natural in Black. That's what Ozzy called it. He wrote that song. Well, the lyrics at least.
The actual title is Nazarene in Black.
Ah, okay. Because I looked at I went on Google, and so I got lies. I got corporate lies.
Yeah.
But
actual title is Nazarene in Black.
Okay.
Let's see.
On the Wikipedia, it said that. Fitch Chozo, and I apologize if I butcher your name, my friend. I'm back. He's back. Thanks for coming back and listening.
He was here earlier, and thank you for showing up, Fizz, man. I stream with him a lot, and I always have a great conversation with him. He's introduced me to a lot of anime stuff that I never would have heard of.
Cool.
That is actually pretty good. And we'll just share this right here, and you can hear this glorious, glorious bass riff for yourselves.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, that is one of the greatest intros to a song of all time.
I know, it's great. 1970.
Yep, this was early 1970, and they released 2 albums in this year, and both of them became immortal classics.
And for the lovers of Black Sabbath, early Black Sabbath, you can go on YouTube and find their inaugural tour where they would go around France and Germany and all that through university, and they're doing all their greatest hits, and that was one of them.
No, it really was. And Jesus, what a musical revolution was that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even talking about Led Zeppelin stuff, like their early output, like Communication Breakdown and stuff like that, Immigrant Song, where you could hear that heavy side of the guitar riff coming in. And also that wailing vocal that Robert Plant was kind of bringing in, almost a high pitched blues style vocal with a lot of soul in it.
I always thought their song, if you want to do a song for Led Zeppelin, where they reach heavy metal, was Living Loving Maid. I always thought
Yeah,
that was the closest thing they ever did to heavy metal, but that's just me.
yeah, that's certainly one of them. Rock and Roll is another one. Although
Yeah,
that's 1971, that's Led Zeppelin 4. So this
yeah,
is after this.
you're right into that big gelling where you got all this influence, including where Credence gets influenced. So you got Black
Yeah, and
Sabbath, you got
they're all
Deep
playing off
Purple,
of each other at this point, which is
exactly.
really cool.
And I can see John Fogerty with his contract having to write a song, and he comes up with Pagan Baby because he heard, NIB from Black Sabbath. He's like, oh, I can do this song, and this is a
Yeah,
good
and
riff
it's like
and on.
that's cool as fuck. I want to do that.
Mhm.
Here's how I'm going to do it.
All right. Sorry, Pope. Fizz Chozo. You got it, my friend.
Yep.
I will always say it that way. Fizz Chozo.
Yep. Yeah, but no, I mean, like this is this cool point with rock history where they're all just iterating off of each other in real time, pretty much.
And the winner are the audience, the people who are buying the vinyl. And the offsprings of the people, us, you and me, Pope, who are here to talk about it. I
Yeah, because
doubt,
this period like comes up with so many classic records because they're all competing and iterating off of each other and just spreading ideas around
and
is
and
just cool as hell.
don't forget, Jimmy, as great as he was musically, lyrically, instrumental. Don't forget, Jimmy used to make his own sound. He used to design his own pedals. Imagine
Yep.
that. Okay, which brought another generation of technical, whether it's roadies or musicians.
Oh
They're
yeah, I
like,
mean this is the era where none of this was very much in terms of sound engineering. Like it was
yeah,
very simple. You had a Marshall amp, a couple of speakers, and maybe a wah pedal.
and
And Jimmy
yeah,
was out there hardwiring his own shit, which is what Eddie Van Halen would come to do later. Like
but
basically designing his own stuff by Frankensteining stuff that already existed and making it sound like what he wanted it to.
only before that, before Jimmy made it a corporate thing, it was just what Keith Richard fucking around with the amp and got
Yep,
the
and maybe and
I could
shortly
get no
after this,
satisfaction.
Brian May from Queen designing his own guitar.
Well, yeah, and don't forget Boston. Boston. That guy went to MIT. Tom
Yep,
Schultz. Okay,
yep, and
that guy revolutionized.
like I said in our it's only talk and roll episode about it. My dad actually
Yeah,
went to high
sorry, I'm
school with Brad
jumping ahead
Delp,
of myself.
but that comes a little bit later. But we'll get to them because they're borderline heavy metal themselves at times,
Yeah.
and they're pretty influential in what I would call power metal
Okay. Well,
coming
see.
out. Which
Yeah.
we'll get into more on Sunday when we go into the history of gamma ray.
Just for the chat and for you, Pope, I work on Sundays, so I'll be delivering. And once I listen to you live, once in a while, I'll pull my phone out of my pocket and I'll put a message. But that's as good as I can be.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean that's just kind of when most of my guests can come on, so that's when I tend to do the show, and it's kind of worked out that way for a
I'm
long
like
time.
I'm a weirdo, like a Catholic priest. I work every Sunday.
Fair. And there's one band I really think you'll dig, even though you're a Catholic. I think you'll really dig these guys' aesthetic and their sound is Ghost.
Ghost?
Yes.
Okay, I'll look them up.
They're really cool. I'll send you some links after the show. I
All
think you'll
right.
really dig them.
So there's two great YouTubers that popped two of my cherries. Believe it or not, I'm 51. I still got cherries to pop. Pope, who popped my metal cherry, and 70s, who popped my Scotch cherry. I never drank Scotch until I'm at 70s. I'm like, all right, well, this guy's Scottish. I'm going to buy some Scotch. I'll drink it with him while I stream with him. It's like, wow, this is great. Mind you, Pope, It's baby steps because again, it's like if you go too fast with me, you'll just turn me off. But so far, I love what you've done.
Well, the funny thing is, I know I shared a song by Bathory with you
Yes,
a
and
few
it was
months ago,
good.
and you actually dig that. That's black metal.
I- y- yes, but it's black metal that sounds like Credence. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
true.
okay,
It
so
sounds like
that's
evil, but it sounds
okay.
like Credence a little bit. Yeah,
Please, evil. You don't know evil until you met a truck driver on a Saturday night. So
I mean
even a
that's
Catholic
very
one.
fair.
So there you go.
But I didn't know how you'd take to that vocal style. I mean, the music and
It
stuff
was
is
good.
really it's really just thrash metal, but raw. Um,
Exactly. That's why I like it. Okay,
but the vocal style, I didn't know if you'd take to because it took
no,
me a
I
while
like
to
it.
get in. People have been following the channel for a while. It took me a long time to get into death metal. But with Bolt Thrower, I actually really found a band I can dig into on it, and the vocal style doesn't bother me with that real deep growly vocal. And
Agree.
black metal has a very off-putting vocal style to most rock music, most
Yeah,
rock people.
yeah, but it's not that just one thing. You can forgive the vocals if everything else is good. All right.
That's the thing
It's like,
is their vocals are not my favorite, but
but everything
the
else is
music
good.
is great.
So you just, yeah, exactly. So you go along. Let's put it this way. Back when I was growing up as a teenager, fucking Guns N' Roses. Okay, Axl Rose was the biggest fucking prick that couldn't hold that couldn't hold a tune in the bucket, but the music was so good that you just went along with it. You know what I mean?
And you know what? I'll bring that back to early Black Sabbath. Ozzy is not the world's best vocalist,
No,
but
no,
his style fits the music that's going along with it.
which makes it unique. Okay, I know Ronnie James Dio was better and all that, and yeah, but I prefer Ozzy. I'm one
I
of those
almost view them
guys.
as two different bands
They are.
because the
They are.
style changes dramatically because you have a different vocalist, and I've said it before on this channel. A vocalist is just another instrument in the band.
Exactly.
So if you change out that instrument, you have to adjust your sound to match.
Hmm.
So with Ronnie, they had to go a little bit brighter, a lot faster,
Yeah.
and a lot more hopeful sounding stuff.
Which might be opening up a door to speed metal.
Well, I
You know
mean
what I mean?
that was more Priest in the 70s, but we'll get into that.
Okay, cool. But okay,
Um,
okay. When it comes to priests, I'm guilty. Living after midnight. I like the corporate stuff about priests. More than that, I don't care.
well, I mean, I'll get you into old school Priest, man, because
All right,
that
all
was the
right,
stuff I heard
all right.
growing up.
Wow! Congratulations, you're popping a second cherry. You should feel manly.
Hang on. Sorry about that.
It's all
Uh,
good. Your house, your
okay, we'll
rules.
edit that out. Wait, we're live. Never mind. Uh, but no, man. Priest, um, in a very real way, kind of perfected the Black Sabbath sound and turned heavy metal into its own genre rather than just a band. Because in
Okay,
1970 there was Black Sabbath,
right,
and
and
Priest had
nothing
just
else.
come out in this year. Like they were just started doing gigs and stuff like that. They
Hmm.
wouldn't actually record an album until 1974, but they were
Okay,
around in this period. And members of the band that wouldn't actually be part of the band until that first album were all listening to Sabbath and thought it was absolutely fucking phenomenal.
and you know why? Because like I told you, Sabbath back then was doing the university tours, right?
Yep.
I
Not
remember
only
them in
universities, but
1970
the
in
bars as
France.
well. They were doing the
Yeah,
bar
yeah,
scene
exactly.
around Birmingham.
So yeah. So they were when they just started out, they were small scale, but they were big scale at the same time because they were so awesome.
And their first record, I can't really recommend, Rockarola. I do enjoy it for what it is, but it doesn't sound like Judas Priest. It's more of a rock record. And
Okay.
then you have Victim of Changes in 1976, and Sad Wings of Destiny with uh, Victim of Changes on it, and I will play the first intro for that. Again, if we get struck, I don't care.
We'll just talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I already have it pulled up.
Nice hardcover.
Oh yeah, Judas Priest has always had some of the best album art out there. So you can kind of hear that hard, deep blues vibe.
It's kind of like Deep Purple without the Hammond organ.
A little bit, yeah. Especially with Ian Gillan's scream.
Woman, don't you know that you are driving me insane? Ow!
See, I hear Ozzy into this.
Yeah, you can hear like the influence, but they're kind of iterating off of it and kind of perfecting that sound.
Exactly.
When you add in that second guitar, it just kind of smooths out the sound a little bit, and it's still really heavy blues, and you can hear that.
Yeah, heavy blues. Thank you.
But it's an entirely different feel to it with that second guitar in there.
That's kind of like what I told you. You always got that musician that takes the ball and runs with it, and he makes his own thing, which makes it awesome. And the only winners are us.
And that's why Judas Priest has been my favorite band of all time, because I mean, 52 years into their career, they still do new stuff with their music. Like they're not just iterating off of their old sound, which I do enjoy from a lot of bands.
Right.
But you can hear two different albums from Priest, even back to back, in terms of when they were produced, and they sound very different. But they both sound like Judas Priest.
Yeah, you can't really say that about my favorite band, Creedence, because it's always kind of the same thing.
Well, because they were kind of unique in their sound, and nobody tried to copy them, because let's face it, you can't.
They cornered the market, lack of a better word.
They just did it perfect the first time around. And I would say that a lot of Black Sabbath stuff I enjoy for what it was, as being like nobody had ever done this before. So they kind of were setting the benchmark for what heavy music sounded like in 1970.
Pope, you allow me another 3-minute break?
Absolutely, man.
All right, you're a good man. I'll be back.
All right. But yeah, go back and listen to this period of music. We'll get more into it on the show in later episodes, but this is the period where you hear the formation of the music, not just, the great stuff we all know and love, but this is where it all comes from. So this is a very specific love of mine, in that, to me, you can't fully appreciate or love something until you know where it comes from, what influenced it, what made it be. So I implore you to go back and listen to a lot of old school Jimi Hendrix stuff. I know that's a burden to go listen to one of the greatest guitar players of all time, but listen to a lot of Jimi Hendrix stuff. Listen to Deep Purple. Listen to Uriah Heep. They have some great stuff, and it all influenced each other in this period where everyone was kind of iterating off of each other at a rapid pace. And it may not even be they took influence from each other, but they were both hearing the same stuff from other bands at the time, and then both kind of took the same direction with it. Good example being a lot of the Led Zeppelin stuff from 1969 and into Black Sabbath in 1970, where they sound similar. I'm not entirely sure they had heard the same records, or they had heard each other's records yet, but they were all kind of pulling in the same direction musically. So they kind of both heard what like Jimi Hendrix and Deep Purple were doing and took the next logical step, kind of in concert, which is awesome. But that we'll get more into the 70s era stuff in another video. I really just want to stick to the early period here. But by the end of 1970, any of you who are metalheads, which if you're watching this show, you probably should be, are going to recognize Paranoid, the second album by Black Sabbath, which came out in September of 1970. Ironically, the day Jimi Hendrix died. And that kind of was a musical watershed. Like their first album was great, don't get me wrong, and it set a lot of people into this more heavier style. But I don't think it was really cemented until Black Sabbath's second release. And they really, I think, with songs like War Pigs, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots, that kind of stuff cemented it as like, this wasn't just a one-off. This is an entire new direction for music. But Christian, if you'll take over for me, I got to take a break too.
All right, no problem. I'll just go on Soul Assassin's comment there. Funny how the 60s was a huge change in creation for music and culture. You are right, my friend. I wouldn't see, that's what I think of when I say it's like a tree. Okay. The 60s was a tree where the root was there. You had the blues from the 50s, the jazz and the gospel, the country, and all that. And it just grew from there, and it branched out and it leafed out to wonderful stuff. Like, dude, you're right. The 60s was a pivotal for music lovers. It was pivotal. Some of the greatest bands, like I'm old enough to, well, I was born in 71. And I remember back at the turn of the century when Y2K came about, I'm trying to think of the music label, but they would come out with 20th Century Masters. And you look at that collection of bands and music that they had, or everybody who more or less grew from the 60s and the 70s. And it was just the perfect time. Mind you, for corporate, and that was also corporate. Not only that, War Pigs, Iron Man are riffs that mostly, yeah, I get that. Okay, but there were a lot of riffs. They were great guitar and bass, but when you think about it, those were just a stepping stone from a progressive thing. I'm talking in circles here, Pope, because I've been put on the spot. I apologize.
Yeah,
but
no worries. I do it all the time.
Yeah, but I was talking about 20th century. You remember in 2000 and 1999, I don't remember who came out with it, but they had these albums, cassettes, vinyls, CDs, 20th century classics. Okay. And they had bands of like everything that was good. They had Jimi Hendrix, they had Toots and the Maytals, they had Elvis. They were just celebrating. And most of this good music, Soul Assassin, came out of the 60s or a derivative of the 60s.
Yeah, like that's why I wanted to cover like the 1950s and 1960s, especially because almost all of actually all of rock and roll came out of this era.
Mm-hmm.
And you had this rapid development in the sound very quickly across two continents. And then into the 70s, you'd have an explosion of especially heavy metal and hard rock in Europe. But even up until 1970, like there was this constant iteration on new ideas that people were coming up with. And it was this very exploratory era of music that spawned a whole bunch of different genres, not just, heavy metal, but folk and
country.
Well, country really evolved in this period.
But Yeah.
And then you had what would become the basis of punk in a lot of it too, especially a lot of the Who's early stuff.
Hmm.
Where we'll get into that on another episode, but the roots of punk are also being sown in this era. Not
But
necessarily with Black Sabbath, but a lot of the music that was coming out around this time.
don't forget the '60s was the most liberating, the most creative, freest. Sorry, my English,
Yeah,
but don't forget the '50s. Elvis, they were just rebelling against the church and all that and
and I think
conformity.
that led into a lot of the social change we'd start to see in the 60s.
Well, that was a derivative of it, but the music was free. There was not a lot of studio involvement. The producers just went along with whatever the
But
people wanted
the
because,
music, I believe, influenced the culture in a way that we had never seen
oh,
before.
of course, that's why I say it's a
In that,
derivative.
like, especially in the in the mid to late 50s, a lot of white kids in America and the West were hearing black artists from America that they never
The
would have heard
first
before.
time. And one person who capitalized on it was Barry Gordon Jr. when he came out with Motown.
Yep.
Okay. He built an empire on the black sound. And may I say, the Beatles and the Stones, those guys were nothing but, at first, when they started off, was cover bands of the classics, American Black.
Yeah. Well, Elvis as well.
Yeah, of course. He was the first one.
Sun Records wanted a white artist that could sound or that could emulate a lot of the black singers that were playing this music at the time. And that's where they discovered him. And then he started doing original stuff as well.
which also flourished. But when it comes to freedom, creativity, garage bands, just great music, that's why the '60s were so great because it was the freest decades.
Just
Even
new ideas coming out of the woodwork
and the
all the time.
producers and the record companies were like, "Oh, what's the next big thing?"
Yeah,
Right?
they
Unlike
didn't have time to influence the music because
no,
there was something new coming out every 5 minutes, and they were
and it,
just trying to keep up.
exactly. Unlike the 2 decades that we just experienced, 2000s and 2010, pop, a nice, very safe, controllable thing. Rock and roll, metal. Okay, well, metal, there's a reason metal, you have guys working day jobs 50 weeks of the year and taking their vacation. Oh, see you later,
Later,
Fizz
Fez.
Chozo. But there's a reason because of corporate control, and not only that, social media. Social media made it impossible for a garage band to come out.
Well,
You know,
until the YouTube era.
and
And
YouTube's
now you'll
social
have
media.
bands that would never have been discovered 10 years ago or never would
Sure,
have been made it past their local market a couple of years ago that are now worldwide sensations in some markets because that's who responds to it and they get to hear it. Whereas before they never would have.
but it's also a double-edged sword because Twitter and YouTube decide what is trending, right? So you can have something good that everybody likes, but conformity, Twitter is telling the mindless sheeps and the useless idiots that, oh, this is what should be followed right now. Oh my God, Donald Trump, whatever.
Well,
I'm using
when you look at it, that's always what rock and metal have been kind of fighting against is this hegemonic control of anything.
exactly.
And we're always the underground
And
of even in the more censorious days of the 2000s and 2010s. A lot of bands got out there by underground websites and stuff like that, just like in the 80s and 90s with the tape trading circuit of you had thrash, death, and black metal bands who would never get a contract really until later.
right.
But they existed at this time and they were recording demos and guys were just trading tapes back and forth of underground stuff that they loved. And that's how the word got out there. And it's kind of the same thing in this era where we're just sharing videos of stuff back and forth on Bandcamp or YouTube or whatever. And guys are getting or people are getting exposed to things that they never would have heard otherwise.
Fair enough. That's one side, but it's a double-edged sword because we're only listening to this because the overlords are letting us. So back in the 60s, the executives and the corporations were following the trend. Unfortunately, nowadays, with all the control with social media and everything, the corporations are controlling everything.
Now
The
they can
old,
control. Now they can control the spread of it. They can't
exactly.
stop it, but they can slow it down.
And that's why you got great things. Well, and also, like I was telling you, uh, you can have this explosion, this generic explosion of that. Wow, I listened to this band and we're good, and they play a track, a bootleg track on Twitter, for example, and everybody starts liking it, and then you got a following for it, and so forth. So yeah, it's double-edged sword. So I guess we're still sitting on the fence when it comes to control. But my point originally was the 60s was a freer, and that's why we had so much good music because there was no control on anything. People took the ball and ran with it, and people expanded and just
Well, and
went on.
especially there was no technology at the time to allow them to
Control.
limit that in any way.
Exactly.
In that, like I said, the record companies were basically running to try to keep up with the trend rather than actually creating things out of their own agenda.
Yeah.
Because they were just trying to keep up with what bands were just naturally doing and what people were listening to.
But Pope, there is still such a cancer in our society called Americans Got Talent,
Yeah.
American Idol. Okay, back then, a bunch of dudes would love music and say, "Fuck it, let's get together. I'll play drums, you play guitar, you figure it out, and all that, and on and on and on." Now it's let's try to get on Americans Got Talent, or and shit like that. There is no grassroots. That's the word I was looking for.
That's the
Grassroots
thing is it's up to
creativity.
us to kind of be that grassroots movement and promote the bands that we hear and like and really get their name out there as much as we can. And unfortunately, that's all you can do.
Yeah, and
Now,
that's why this.
things like YouTube, like this show, give me a little bit larger of a soapbox than I normally have.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
again, it's just me and my soapbox talking about the bands I love and the music I really like listening to. And, thank you all for being here for it.
yeah, but look at it this way. Your soapbox reached out to Canada, and now you got this guy who's starting a new channel who will reach out to more people and so forth. So it's kind of like the 60s, I guess.
Well, that's how grassroots works is,
Yeah.
I affect the one next to me and then he does his own thing with it. And before you know it,
Absolutely.
you've got an actual genuine
Movement.
idea or movement
Idea
coming
or
through.
love.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Whether you call it a movement, fandom,
Whatever.
you want to call it is kind of irrelevant. Like that's what it is a natural, community builds up around the things that we love.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that I've always loved about, the YouTube space is that as negative as a lot of the world can be at times, we can still rally around the things that we all know and love, like music. Like the 60s rock and roll, you can pretty much pluck a guy off the street and he'll know and at least like half of the shit we're talking about. Which is one of the reasons I did this is, not only to chronicle the origins of the music that I love, which has been the fun of this for me all along. It's also just to kind of get people who may not be huge metalheads like, hey, this is where we came from and this is where we started. So start at the beginning and work your way forward and see what you like.
Or your evil pleasure, popping Credence lovers cherries.
Corrupting the innocent.
Sure. If you want to call truckers innocent, yeah, have at
Well,
it.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. No, man. This has been great.
It's been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me tonight.
Absolutely, man. And I always loved talking, especially early heavy metal like this, because it was still this raw, unformed thing
I know.
that nobody really knew what to do with,
And you know what I'm going to do
including the
right
bands
now?
themselves.
You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to go pull out my not ACDC, sorry, Black Sabbath album. And the first song I'm going to play is NIB on my vinyl, right over
Hell
there,
yes.
right over there.
Hell yes. This is why
Thank
we
you.
do this
Thank
thing.
you, Pope.
Even if you've listened to it a million times before, well, why not make it a million times in one? Because why not?
I listened to it so many times, my 15-year-old little girl loves it. So, it's good.
Well, and certain things speak across generations. Good ideas win out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, when you come right down to it, all music is an idea put in notes and bars rather than, a poet or than a poem or something like that. It's just an expression of internal ideas, as
Um,
everything else is.
would you allow me to do a little off the cuff joke?
Absolutely. Go for it.
All right. This Canadian American production been brought to you by a great Canadian beer, Old Milwaukee.
And has been
Thank
heavily
you.
influenced by a great American beer, Yingling.
And
Neither one
what
of
up? So, it's so good.
neither one of us sponsors us. So if you're
And
listening, my emails are open.
it's so good that even Canadians and Americans agree on it. We don't agree on anything, including hockey.
And Soul Assassin, trust me, those two are already in contact quite heavily. I think you've been on the show before, right?
With 70, oh shit, me and 70s had this thing. What was it? Secret Tracks.
Yep.
We would do live streams with 70. Yeah, Soul Assassin. Me and 70s are buds. Like fuck, every free money I have, I keep sponsoring him and all that. And we had these things on Wednesday night that we would do. Was it Forgotten Tracks or something? We would do some obscure music that me and 70s like for example Robert Palmer or Jeff Lynne or you name it, all these guys that were good but not popular. Hey, me and 70s are tight. I actually almost had a meetup with 70s back in March for a hockey game down in Calgary, but I couldn't afford it. So but anyway, no, and we should do a live stream, all three of us. If it makes Soul Assassin happy, should make music lovers happy.
We will absolutely do that at some point. I was hoping 70s have the time tonight because I know he's usually free these nights, but it is what it is.
That guy, since he got on with Pop Culture Minefield, that guy's got no time anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you've got a ton of shit you have to do, even for this side of the show, where I only have 240 subscribers. I have a ton of shit I have to do for the show every week, which rolling that around a full-time job is interesting at the best of times. And hopefully I'll be able to get some more production value for you guys in the near future, because I have some ideas on what I want to do for that. And a couple of friends of mine reached out and shared some resources where I can just kind of work on it in my own time. And maybe get you guys some intros and stuff like that are interesting and not just me running my mouth.
Listen, you got a French Canadian hockey fan here agreeing with you. So it's not just you running your mouth. You might be onto something.
Well, even if I'm not, you guys keep showing up and supporting it. So thank you for enduring my ramblings.
It's your lovable face, Pope. What can we say?
What can I say? I have a face made for radio.
Well, I pity the women around you. That's all I could say.
But with that, man, I know you've had a channel in the works for a while. So what do you got coming up?
Well, I got shit. Okay, to be honest with you, I unfortunately, like I was talking to you earlier, I know you're being polite. I apologize to be so brash, but procrastination is getting the best of me. There's always something better else to do. I do not
you mean
focus.
like the Sabaton video I've been planning to
Yeah,
record for a
yeah,
week and a half
that's
now,
one
and
of
I have
them.
not?
It's in my inbox, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it next week on my day off. And my day off comes over, and oh, look at that! There's an old Milwaukee here,
Yeah.
and so forth. It's just kind of like my Star Trek Enterprise. Um, I I come in spurts. How do you say that in English? Spurts and
Yeah,
spuns.
that's pretty much right.
Okay, some days I can tackle the world. Other days it's like, okay, I just want to go under the radar. But I'm coming up into a productive phase, so I do have my vinyl revival channel. I got it all set up. I got the YouTube, I got the Twitter, I got the email, I got everything, and I got a couple scripted videos about some albums. Basically, vinyl revival will be me talk about some of my favorite 33 RPMs. That's it. Mind you, I will start the channel, and this is where I get discouraged. There are 4 men in this world that I want on my channel: Pope Metallicus, who brought me into this YouTube world; 70s, who I just have a fond love of; Nick Weiser, which is my first YouTuber that I had a meetup with in Chicago; and also the comic relief crusader, who's actually a graphic designer who did my vinyl revival
Yeah,
thing and
and
Pope's vinyls.
for those of you who don't remember, he also did the avatar
Yours.
for my channel.
Yes, and the hard part to start my channel is getting these 4 gentlemen on with me. So that's what I'm working on, Pope. I'm trying to get all you people. You people. What do you mean, you people? So yeah, great quote. And I'm trying to get you on my channel and into a live stream. So that's what I was
Absolutely,
going
man.
on.
Let me know
And
when and where, and we'll try to make it happen.
I know you're the easiest one to get along with. It's 70s and Nick. That's like fucking impossible. Nick, stop
Well, he's
focusing
on
on
so
these.
many things these days,
I
and
know he's on
he's got a
everything.
ton of stuff going on and behind the scenes too. So he's
Uh,
available when he's available.
Mind you, 70s did tell me, he's like, Christian, okay, because I've given enough money and all that, and I've friends with him and all that. He's like, Chris, whenever you want to do it, I'm there. So Nick is the hardest one to get in touch with. I got maybe on a Saturday night, maybe 40 minutes of his time, because then his family comes in. So anyway, so cool. So that's what I got going. Sorry for the rant.
Yeah,
It's
no
old
worries,
Milwaukee. It's old Milwaukee fueled. Don't judge me.
This unhinged ramblings have been brought to you by Old Milwaukee.
Yes, America's beer.
and then as for me, you guys can catch me every Sunday on this channel for rock and roll religion, the mainstream. This Sunday we'll be talking some Gamma Ray, which is going to be really cool because they're an old school power metal pioneer that kind of spun out of a band we've already talked about, Halloween. So that'll be really interesting. And I dig these guys a lot. So hopefully you guys will be there for that.
I will.
Again, if you guys do want to support the channel, there is a pinned comment and also a link in the description to my stream elements. If you guys donate between the shows, I'll make sure to read those before we get going on Rock and Roll Religion. Other than that, you guys can catch me every Monday on It's Only Talk and Roll over on 70s Rock Fans channel, and my occasional appearances on the MF for Cocktail Lounge and some other stuff. So with that all being said, take care, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.